Welcome to this week's Stacking to Win It for Week 10. I'm Jason Gilbert, JGilbert11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Illy 42. You're looking to, really stack with the Cardinals, obviously, is the first one. But we were kind of talking before, and it's, a possible week where we could mix and match a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's, aside from the Cardinals, which even in that stack, it's not like necessarily set obvious plays that, aside from David Johnson, that you roll in there. But team total over 30 points. I mean, they're by default the highest stack or the easiest top stack, and it's just a matter of how you decide to stack them, because obviously David Johnson, incredibly expensive, going to be really, really popular. I said 45 to 50% here. He should be much higher than that, but I think because of his price, maybe he's around 50%. I could be way off base with that. But, I don't even particularly love Palmer in this matchup, but I do think that if the 49ers keep this one close, the sky's the limit for this stack. And throw Palmer in there. I think if I'm going to go the full stack, I'll probably play Palmer with Johnson and Nelson, because I go a little bit cheaper with Nelson, save the money off Fitzgerald, and hope that he's the one that can find the end zone instead of Fitz. But with this one, you could even just go a full stack of the defense and just David Johnson, just those two. And that's a fine stack too, because it's going to be probably the most popular plays at any position is the Arizona defense and David Johnson. So you might even just be smart to just go ahead and stack that in your cash games.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. And I think, this is certainly, obviously, you look at this 30-team total, there's a lot to go around, but kind of a way you can get contrarian with it maybe, and, not necessarily fading David Johnson, but if the passing attack does do the majority of the damage, that's a pretty good swerve off of Johnson.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's definitely upside.
High risk.
Very high risk. I won't make any lineups without David Johnson on him this week. There's some validity to it, because if maybe he goes and gets 120 yards, doesn't score a touchdown, and you see passing touchdowns, 3 or 4 of them, maybe even if we're talking like upside wise, it's possible. I don't have the stomach for it, but that's the kind of fade that could pay off in a huge way.
Yeah, definitely could. We saw it last week. Obviously Dallas was a popular stack, but say Ezekiel Elliott only finds the touchdown, once, and he only rushes for 60 yards. But Dak Prescott in that passing game, they paid off their price tags pretty nicely. That would have been a nice fade. But, that's the kind of thing we're looking at here again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your top stack number 2, looking at the Falcons on the road against the Eagles, team total of 26. One of your more expensive ones, but certainly a high upside one, especially with the way they're playing.
Yeah, the Matt Ryan, Julio Jones is really a stack that I think is kind of an easy one here. I don't think it'll be as popular because, like we said, David Johnson's going to be on most people's rosters. He's expensive. There's other options of Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, guys you could pay up for at wide receiver. But, for me, Matt Ryan, Julio, I think is one that if you're making multiple lineups, I think you almost have to get yourself at least one stack of those guys. Tevin Coleman, they're saying maybe he'll play, maybe he won't. You don't imagine he's going to have a significant role either way. So you could always throw in Devonta Freeman, although he really hasn't shown, the type of upside that we saw last year. This year, because there's so many options in the passing game now, and, they don't really need him to have those big games. He had a huge game against New Orleans. Obviously, Tevin Coleman had a big game then too. Scored twice against Green Bay, but yardage-wise, not a good game. He's still a guy who's only averaging less than 70 yards per game as far as rushing totals. So he's a guy that's definitely GBP only for me here. But if Tevin Coleman sits out, I'll definitely be more interested.
And the price tags are really nice, especially on FanDuel. Just $7K, really reasonable price tag there for Freeman. Looking at the value stack in that same game, this one's a really cheap one. We've been talking about Jordan Matthews quite a bit. Obviously, talked about Sproles on the FanDuel podcast. But everyone else, even Zach Ertz, Carson Wentz, those guys are cheap too.
Yeah, and we talked also, Carson Wentz hasn't been great, but I think his ownership's going to be really low for what is a pretty good matchup here. Didn't have a touchdown pass last week, but still had 15 DK points, the type of thing that wouldn't kill your GPP teams, especially at near minimum salary. So, Wentz and Matthews there. Ertz was a guy that really only kind of got going because they were behind and having to throw a ton of passes late. So he's the riskiest of these guys. Darren Sproles, obviously, if he can find some room in that passing game, we know he's got the floor of, 10 to 15 carries likely this week. So you could go, you're not going to go full-blown stack here, but if you want to mix in 3 of these guys here, you got to imagine that there's some decent upside with these guys. And you could easily put a David Johnson and a Mike Evans or something like that in with this stack and be perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the move I would like to make is putting in Julio Jones. I mean, I think if you imagine that this game's going to be popping off, Jones will be a part of it on the other side.
Yeah, I like that move a lot. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because you figure if Atlanta's up, of course, Julio's going to have his role in there, and then playing catch up. I mean, on either side, one of those guys is going to have a big game.
Yeah, definitely. Your contrarian stack, you're looking for the Patriots to go on the road. Team total very high, so Vegas not really expecting much of a downgrade, with this type of matchup and performance. So you're looking at the Patriots here.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they have so much higher of a total at Seattle. Or I'm sorry, they're at home, aren't they? Yeah, they're at home. But either way, that much higher of a total than Denver has in New Orleans against that defense. That just tells you how good. Partially how bad the Denver Broncos offense is, but also how good Tom Brady's been. I mean, it's crazy to think that at his age, almost 40, he looks better than he ever has before. Rob Gronkowski just cannot be stopped right now. I don't expect the Seahawks to find a way to stop him. And I feel like James White is a guy that people will be on. And I've tried to stay on the right side of the White versus Blunt thing. And I mean, Blunt, I feel like it's the safest option. And also, if you expect that the Patriots are going to be up in this game, which I think they will be, and they should be, and Vegas thinks they will be, it doesn't really make sense to play a guy like James White because he's kind of the catch-up mode, score some points in the passing game kind of guy that really doesn't have much of a floor. He doesn't get goal line carries. That's not going to change. That's Blunt's role. I mean, you look at the game, his biggest game this year, really his only big game, was against the Bengals, and I mean, that was a game where they were down in the second half somehow, and then, they just needed to get back in the game. Once they got that offense moving, him and Gronkowski just kind of took it over. So I'm not a James White guy. I don't think I'll play him again this year. I actually haven't played him yet at all. But I think that Blunt's the play here if you're going to go with the third player.
Yeah, and kind of a salary relief in this matchup too. So, I mean, pretty cheap. Gets those red zone looks. And obviously, 60 yards and a touchdown, he could pay off basically both those price tags pretty easily.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's going to wrap it up with this week's Stacking to Win It. Be sure to head on over to DaveFantasyCafe.com. Check out our great tools and content. If you want to see these stacks in the written form, it's up on the site now.